May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. So happy Halloween, everybody. Today is Hallowed Eve, All Hallows Eve. Halloween, and though we're celebrating with our readings for the 23rd Sunday after Pentecost in ordinary time, we're not celebrating Halloween in Emmanuel. Although I just say it's entirely possible that your rector might, I don't know, be wearing a scary cat skirt with black bat lace over it. But you don't need to worry about that. It's hidden under her Alban stolen chasuble. That's why we wear vestments, right? To focus on our roles in worship. Now, I wear these vestments to identify my role as the worship leader and priest. Bobby identifies himself as the acolyte with his chasuble, or sometimes with a L, and sometimes you will wear a cassock and a surplice. It's so that we can focus on what we're doing together and not on unusual clothing choices, like be thinking instead of praying about, oh, I love that jacket, or what on earth is Della thinking with those shoes? And pumpkins today are a fitting and appropriate decoration for this season. Any altar in October will be wearing pumpkins this year, when the colors and cooler temperatures are telling us that fall is here and Advent is coming. But would it be so very wrong to think of Halloween as a religious holiday? As a celebration that points us to important insights for our faith? Halloween has been a controversial holiday over time, as many Christians worry that it is a pagan holiday and that to celebrate it would somehow be sacrilegious. And Halloween did originate from pagan holidays honoring the dead, just as many of our religious holidays originate from seasonal rhythms, harvest rhythms, cycles of the moon. Religious observances become most meaningful when they are rooted in their own place and circumstances with the people. And most of our holidays that we celebrate as religious holidays have glommed on to some kind of cyclical rhythm that makes sense in a seasonal time that has become an integral part of the culture. Think of the word holiday itself, our ready use. We use holiday very easily with the word pagan, don't we? Or secular. We'd say secular holiday, and our word in English that we honor for cultural significance comes directly and plainly from the words holy day. So November 1 is All Saints' Day, and All Hallows Eve, that's today. The name is derived from the Old English word hallow and hallowed, which means holy and sanctified. And think of the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. We're not saying that the name of God is pagan and celebrating Halloween. Instead, we're saying God's name is holy. The word pagan simply indicates polytheistic faiths, other than faiths that are descended from the God of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel. In other words, pagan means polytheistic faiths other than Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which all proclaim faith in the one God of Israel. And so the traditional name for today, All Hallows Eve, is now usually contracted to Halloween, sometimes with an apostrophe between the two E's. And it marks a time when the veil between the living and the dead is thin, allowing the souls of the dead to come back and walk among us. And with that translation, Halloween would be another name, another translation for that would be All Saints' Eve. All Saints' Eve. So how can our popular celebration of Halloween, with all our spooky skeletons and cobwebs and ghosts and witches, how can that remind us in our context today of the holy day of All Saints' Day in our Christian calendar? I know you're wondering, right? Scripture tells us clearly and specifically in our readings appointed for today, the 23rd Sunday after Pentecost, falling on Halloween, that dressing up and decorating our houses and doorways, that's holy. Those are hallowed acts. Our first reading today from the book of Deuteronomy contains the great Shema, the central tenet of the Jewish faith and therefore also of our Christian heritage. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And that's exactly what Jesus tells the scribe in Mark's gospel today. The scribe overhears the Sadducees arguing among themselves and asking Jesus to weigh in to settle a dispute. The scribe notices that Jesus gives a really good answer, clarifies things, has some excellent insights. So he decides to consult Jesus with a question of his own. Which commandment is the first of all? The scribe asks. Jesus, the good Jew, answers with the great Shema, right from our Deuteronomy reading this morning. Jesus says, the first is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And then Jesus continues. The second is this. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. It's really important to mention that Jesus didn't make that second one up. It comes straight from Leviticus, and it is interwoven throughout the Hebrew Bible, which Christians call the Old Testament. Love of neighbor is commanded and known, and Jesus is a good Jew and a scholar of Scripture. Because remember, the scribe, when he consults Jesus, is asking Jesus this question because he's overheard him answering questions in a learned way, and he addresses Jesus as teacher in this very paragraph. Jesus is answering the scribe's question with the greatest commandment and expanding his response to include the second greatest commandment. So let's consider my earlier claim that today's readings directly support decorating our doorways and dressing up, the very main events of the Halloween celebration, to remind us of the central tenets of our faith. Let's go back to chapter 6 of Deuteronomy, the words right after the great Shema. This is what comes next. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children and talk about them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Every day at the Western Wall in the old city of Jerusalem, Orthodox Jewish men worship wearing tefillin on their foreheads and on their arms. Long straps that bind them with little leather boxes filled with parchment scrolls. That is an observance of this very clear commandment. Tefillin is the plural form of the word in Hebrew. And if the parchments are, as you probably know, stretched animal skin from a ritually clean animal, and they are inscribed with the instruction to bind the greatest commandment to your head and to your arm as a reminder of God's saving grace. And many Christians also, particularly those in religious orders, like clergy and monastics, they wear specific clothing to remind us of our promises to God, just as this passage from Deuteronomy instructs. And the second part of today's passage from Deuteronomy, and write these words on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, instructs God's people to decorate their doors, to remind them of important promises of the faith. Jews all over the world, and particularly in Israel, place mezuzot, that's plural, singular is mezuzah, on the doorposts of their houses, on the right side, typically at a little slant. You see them everywhere. And they contain, like the tefillin, tightly rolled pieces of parchment with the words from Deuteronomy 6:4-9 that we read this morning. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. I want to return to the discussion of Halloween as a holy day rather than as a pagan celebration. If Scripture clearly tells us to wear reminders of our faith as clothing and to decorate our doors with signs of our faith to others, why can't Halloween costumes and traditions be the cultural emblems and ways we remind ourselves of the second great commandment, love of neighbor? Especially when we're already wearing masks in love and care for our neighbor to keep each other safe from the virus. There are kind people we hear about in the news who provide children who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford them Halloween costumes, giving them a chance to dream and participate and have fun and grow and stretch their imaginations. And yeah, there are a few werewolves, I'm sure, and vampires, but there are also kids who dress up as nurses and doctors and firefighters and dream of who they may be one day and form that idea in their future. And that gift of that opportunity to dream and grow, that's a gift of outreach to the least of these. And why couldn't we live out our love to our neighbor, wearing our masks for safety and in honor of the greatest commandments, and decorating our doors with spider webs and skeletons and pumpkins, put out some great pumpkins and really good candy? Baby Ruth's and Heath bars are my favorite, to say. And welcome trick-or-treaters on this holy day of All Hallows Eve. Amen.